And many of you will have seen the keynote that he gave at Freedom to Connect. I know it was on high rotation, it was on blind body, so many of you will have seen it. And he tells his story about how he got involved in the superclassifier. But I'm going to tell the other half of the story, like my version of it from EFF. It was late 2010, and we got the word from a group that we work with in DC called Public Knowledge. They said, oh, there's this new copyright enforcement bill called Quaker, the Combating Online Infringement and Copyright Act. You know, it's being circulated. It's going to go through committee in a week or two. It's going to pass a week or two after that. And we were sitting around in our office over on Shotwell Street reading this thing, and our eyes were just popping out. Because over the years, we'd had a lot of practice fighting Hollywood. You know, it's one of the things that EFF does. We try to defend the internet against Hollywood. But there was something different about this bill. First of all, I wouldn't say that Hollywood had totally understood the internet. But this time around, unlike some of the crazy proposals that they dreamt up previously, they had at least hired an engineer or two, or someone who'd like once adminned a computer. and so they'd actually picked a designer for their bill that was going to affect real things in a concrete way. And it was going to create rules for people who ran the recursive DNS resolvers in the United States. It was going to affect the way the DNS registries operated. We knew this thing was going to cause chaos if it was going to pass. And then the second thing that was different from many of the bills that we'd seen from Hollywood was this was actually, as far as we could tell, it was going to pass really quickly. All of our allies in DC said, yep, they've got the votes, they've got the numbers, it's co-sponsored by the majority of the Judiciary Committee, done deal. All we can do is amend it. Maybe, if we're lucky, we'll get a few amendments into this. And we knew that even 50% of this bill, or 30% of this bill injected into the domain name system was going to cause havoc that would be with us, ruining things for decades. So there was a moment of panic and kind of shockwaves went around the office, and I sat there thinking, you know, what can we do? Like, how can I take action as a single individual standing here to do something about this thing happening far away in DC that's going to mess up the internet that we all depend on and love. And I did a few things. The third thing I did was I called a bunch of DNS experts and said, can you please go to DC and help to explain why this is a terrible idea? And a number of them did. I especially want to thank Dan Kaminsky and Paul Vixie, who some of you may know. Those guys got onto planes and started walking around on Capitol Hill, which is an incredibly unhospitable place for geeks, and trying to explain why this was a bad idea. And so the second thing I did is I wrote an open letter explaining the problems with the bill and circulated it to a whole lot of people who invented bits of the internet, written RFCs, and close to 100 of them signed it. So that, that was helpful. But the first thing I did, and I think this was the most important, is that I picked up the phone and I called Aaron. And I said, Aaron, help. I didn't just do that at random. I knew that he had been involved in running an organization called the Progressive Change Campaign Committee that had built a pretty large mailing list, had been pretty effective at working on a bunch of liberal causes on the East Coast. And so he was someone who I knew who understood technology and also had been doing some concrete work with boots on the ground politics. And I was hoping, I knew that he was, it seemed like he was having some kind of fallout with the other people he was running this organization with, but I thought maybe they can get the band together just one last time to help us in this fight. Because we've got this bill that's going to pass in 2 weeks if we don't do something about it. So I said, okay, that's going to be really hard, to make that happen. But the first thing he did is he got on the train and went down to DC. And he met with another Aaron. There was another Aaron who'd written the bill. He worked in Senator Leahy's office. And so these two Aarons, the one wearing a suit inside DC Operative, and our friend Aaron Swartz, the in his Reddit t-shirt or an EFF t-shirt or whatever he was wearing that day, hunched over, barely able to see anything through his glasses. The two of them met and talked. Aaron said for 2 hours or something about this bill, and he just explained why this was a terrible idea. And Aaron Cooper, who'd written it, replied each time saying, "Oh yes, but what you don't understand is that copyright and copyright enforcement is more important than the internet. Sure, you've got this internet thing, but actually this thing is more important. And it doesn't matter if things break or need to be reorganized. The priority of this country is going to be making sure that files cannot be shared, songs cannot be copied, movies cannot be copied, and we'll break things if that's the easiest way to do it. We're going to have to do it." And so Aaron came away from that meeting kind of despondent, and because he thought he'd be able to talk people out of it. And I came away worried that he might have just explained all of our best arguments to the other side. 2 hours of explaining exactly all of the details of why this is a bad idea seemed like just extreme warning to them. That they'd be able to tailor a message that was exactly perfect at defeating us everywhere. But it turned out that I didn't need to be worried, because Aaron then got so angry, he went back, he somehow started a new organization called Demand Progress that was a clone of his old one. I don't know if he got, I still don't know if he got some of the mailing list from his old organization or whether he started a fresh one. But in 2 weeks, he put together a campaign organization, and it did things differently to the way that we did them at EFF, where we were very good at figuring out the relationship between a complicated piece of law and a complicated piece of technology, and explaining that to you guys and our community of technologists primarily. And we had allies in DC who were good at knowing the inside game, but at least some of them were going to be focused on amending the bill, cutting a deal, trying to make it 50% as bad, and we knew that if that happened, we were still going to lose. What we needed was a left flank. And Aaron and Demand Progress provided that to us. They showed up, and they'd send out these emails with a link to a page that just had 2 or 3 incredibly simple, sometimes oversimplified, sometimes just nailing it in 2 sentences, descriptions of the problem, and a giant graphic saying, "Take action." And overnight, he got close to 1 million people engaged in fighting this thing. And later on, when we had a bigger coalition, more groups, everyone was able to sort of learn the campaign lessons. You'll see now that when EFF does big actions, our things are a little bit simpler and more elegant, because we learned to copy Aaron and copy that method of simplicity. But back then, Demand Progress was kind of the only thing that helped to get us through a few weeks where we thought this bill was going to sail out of committee and sail through the 2010 Congress, and we would be living with SOPA or PIPA, in fact, COICA, which was worse than those bills today. And so, that was just one amazing thing that I saw Aaron do in the time that I knew him. I saw him do a lot of other amazing things, and I'm incredibly sad I didn't get to see 50 years more of him changing the world in the same kind of ways. But I didn't. Aaron isn't with us anymore, and we're going to have to figure out how to finish some of the projects that he started and how to approach life and approach problems with some of the tricks that he was able to. So there are 2 things that we at EFF are going to be working on in the next few weeks that we see as just things we have to do for Aaron now. One of them you've probably already seen a fair amount about is doing something about the hacking laws, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and wire fraud laws that we use to compile and charge Aaron with 35 years in prison worth of charges because he got onto an open access network on the MIT campus, changed his MAC address a few times, and downloaded a data set that everyone on that network had open access to. Not everyone in the world, just people at MIT. And from our point of view, there's no way that that's clearly criminal, and it certainly shouldn't be a felony, and it certainly shouldn't be a felony with 35 or 50 years in prison as a sentence. So we're going to be trying to reform those computer crime and hacking laws to inject some sanity there, and in the hope that the next Aaron who comes along isn't going to be faced with the same insanity. The other thing that we're going to be working on is trying to finish or make some progress on the particular thing that Aaron was doing that day at MIT. You know, he knew that during the 20th century, almost every single publicly funded piece of research that came out of a university anywhere in the world had the copyright assigned to an academic publisher who then proceeded to lock up this knowledge in various journals and databases. And there's a fundamental injustice in the proposition that taxpayers have to pay enormous amounts of money to support research, which is great, but then do not get to read the results of the research that they paid for. And Aaron perhaps saw that fixing the copyright mess around that problem was too hard. He tried to find a simple solution. If we believe the prosecutor's allegations against him, perhaps he planned to go in and download all of those 5 or 10 million articles and just publish them somewhere. He didn't get to do that the easy way, but now we're going to have to do it the hard way, which is going through Congress, going through executive orders, figuring out to get that scientific literature that Aaron died fighting for and open it so that all of you can read it, so that everyone can read it. Those are things that EFF is going to be working on. There's one last thing that I want to say. This isn't a message from EFF. This, I think, is a message from Aaron, or Aaron's ghost. If he was standing here, he'd be like waving his arms around, yelling at me right now, saying, "Peter, you've missed the point." He'd say, "Yeah, look, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act is bad, whatever." He'd say, "Yeah, look, the scientific literature is important and you should free it, certainly, but there's a bigger picture here." And the bigger picture is the criminal justice system that was so willing to throw Aaron in prison for being a creative, unorthodox young human being. And Aaron isn't alone in being a person who is more or less randomly targeted for doing something that isn't violent against anyone, doesn't even necessarily, may not have a victim at all, and being thrown in prison for extended periods of time for it. I come from a country, Australia, that sentences a number of people to prison each year. Per capita, the United States sentences 5 times as many people to prison as Australia does. Canada is 6 times, the United States is 6 times higher than Canada, 7 times higher than Sweden. It's unlike any other first world country. And this is a problem that won't get fixed unless wealthy, connected, powerful people who work in the middle, is like in middle-class jobs or upper-class jobs in the technology. In the technology industry. You guys in this room have power. You can change the world. Many of you probably already have through your own projects and the companies you've started or the things you've built. If you work to change that bigger problem, you can change it. That's the lesson that Aaron taught us. You find a simple way, pull out a few of the support systems for that scaffolding of injustice, and the whole thing comes tumbling down. And that's something that all of us need to look for ways to do with the American criminal justice system. Because for every Aaron, there are a million working class kids that we don't get to see. And that's what he'd be standing next to me yelling about, saying, "Peter, you've got to do something about that." So.